The wind howled across the arid plains as the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving streaks of crimson in its wake. The village prepared for nightfall, lighting small fires outside their huts and whispering old tales to keep the darkness at bay. Among these tales was that of the bone collector, a spirit feared and loathed, a reminder of the power held by their ancestors. Only the foolish doubted its existence. Tao, a brash young hunter with more ambition than respect, stood tall before the gathered crowd that evening. He had returned with a prize, a massive eland, its horns curving majestically and its hide gleaming in the firelight. Pride lit his eyes as he spoke, his voice booming. "Behold! I have claimed the greatest catch in years. I have no need for old rituals or whispering ancestors. My skill alone brought this beast down." The elders, seated in a semicircle, exchanged worried glances. The eland was sacred, and its life demanded reverence. Omari, the village's oldest and wisest, stepped forward, his bones creaking like the branches of an ancient tree. "Tao," he warned, his voice as heavy as the coming night, "you mock the ways of those who came before us. Spill no blood without respect." But Tao only laughed, dismissing the warnings with a wave of his hand. That night, as the others paid homage to the eland spirit with offerings and chants, Tao remained in his hut, feasting on its flesh, oblivious to the first omen. A bone, thin and gleaming white, rested outside his door. The next morning, Tao awoke feeling a cold draft creep along his skin. He pushed aside his sleeping mat and stepped outside. There it was, the bone, now joined by another, lying eerily parallel to the first. He snorted, kicking them aside as if they were merely twigs. But his bravado could not erase the unease gnawing at him. By midday, whispers had spread like wildfire. "The bone collector has marked him," a woman muttered, clutching her child tightly. "He must make amends," an elder insisted, but Tao refused to listen. His defiance grew sharper, his words cutting through the air as he dismissed the legends as nothing more than old tales meant to scare children. That night, Tao lay awake, unable to shake the feeling that eyes were watching him, unblinking, unseen, and inescapable. He lit a torch and stepped outside, daring the night to reveal itself. The wind carried the faint rattle of something shifting in the brush. He held his breath. From the shadows emerged a trail of bones. More had appeared, forming a jagged path that led toward the village's outskirts. Fear crept up Tao's spine, but he forced himself to follow. The bones led him deeper into the bush, to a clearing bathed in silver moonlight. There, they stopped abruptly. Silence pressed down around him, so thick it felt like a living thing. He spun around, torchlight trembling in his grasp, as a chill crawled over his skin. Shadows moved, coalescing into a shape, a skeletal figure cloaked in tattered skins. The bone collector. Its hollow eyes burned with a sickly green light, and its bony fingers clutched a staff adorned with the remains of those who had crossed it. Tao's bravado shattered. He stumbled back, his mouth dry, but no words would come. The bone collector spoke, its voice like the grinding of stones. "You have desecrated the sacred. You have broken the bond between the living and the dead." Tao tried to protest, to defend his actions, but his words fell apart beneath the weight of the spirit's gaze. "There is no forgiveness," it intoned. "Only restitution." With that, the ground beneath Tao's feet shifted. Bones erupted from the earth, coiling around his ankles and wrists like the cold hands of the long-forgotten dead. He struggled, but the more he resisted, the tighter they held. Panic surged in him like a wildfire. He could feel his strength fading, drawn away by the very spirits he had scorned. The village awoke to Tao's screams, but none dared venture into the bush. They watched from a distance as the moon sank, taking with it the echoes of his pleas. When dawn broke, they found no sign of him, only a perfectly arranged circle of bones, gleaming in the morning light. The days that followed were heavy with unease. The circle of bones remained untouched, a stark reminder of the cost of disrespect. But the bone collector's work was not yet done. Every night, villagers reported hearing the faint rattle of bones just beyond the glow of their fires. Those who strayed too close claimed to see bony fingers retreating into the dark, and some whispered that Tao's voice could be heard among them, pleading, warning, or cursing his fate. One night, a curious child approached the circle of bones. Despite her parents' warnings, she was drawn to it, her small hand reaching out to touch the nearest bone. The ground trembled, and a low, guttural groan rose from the earth. Before anyone could intervene, the bone collector appeared, towering and terrible. "The living must remember," it said. "The death of one taints all." The elders scrambled to offer sacrifices and prayers. They gathered sacred herbs, burned them, and sang the chants passed down for generations. The bone collector watched, unmoving, until at last, it raised a skeletal hand. The bones within the circle quivered and collapsed, merging back into the earth. The child was spared, but the price had been made clear: balance must be maintained, and the ancestors' bond could not be broken without consequence. From that day on, the village lived in reverence of their past. The legend of the bone collector burned deep into their hearts. The circle remained a forbidden place, a reminder and a warning. The tale of Tao spread far and wide, and fires burned brighter at night. But even as the years passed, villagers would sometimes feel a bone beneath their foot in the darkness, or hear the distant clatter of something moving in the night, a reminder that the bone collector was always watching, ready to reclaim what was owed.